Hi guys, I decided to do my London video again. Well, what to play against London for knight f6 players. So I wasn't totally satisfied about my explanations and the amount of lines I gave. So here after d4, this video will cover a system to play against the London system for knight f6 players. So I think knight f6 is the more flexible move, although many white players play d5 here. And after knight f6, white goes into the early London system with bishop f4. This has become very popular in recent years, and many London experts claim this is a better move order for white than knight f3 on this move. So as black, we are kind of happy since we know that the opponent wants to play the London right away. In one of my videos, I talk about a sideline with c7, c6 and to go queen b6 later. However, it looks like several London courses have spotted this idea, and while you can still play it, it probably has lost some of the surprise value. So this was my earlier idea. But what we want to do here is to go for e6. So e6 is the third most popular move in the Lichess database. There was one line in particular which gave me some headaches, but I think I found a good antidote. And before I start explaining our plan, let's take a look at white's plan. So white has brought his bishop to f4. He wants to develop it to an active square before closing the center with e2, e3. White wants to set up a triangle pawn center similar to the Slav defense with pawns on e3, d4 and c3. His slight squared bishop will usually go to d3, his knight here to f3. This knight will go to d2. This square on e5 will often be used as an outpost, especially by this knight, which can come from f3 to e5, also called a Pillsbury knight, if you have heard of that term. So that knight there, he controls some important squares. Also helps the white pieces create some threats and supports his own pieces. It's not the end of the world, but that knight can be annoying. So my suggestion here is not to play the main move, let's see, e3, not to play the main move d5, but to actually play c5 here. It's an interesting move, and we want to attack the center right away, and one of the points is we keep this pawn on d7 for as long as practically possible. There's nothing wrong with d5, but when we keep the pawn on d7, then it might be useful. Let's say the knight comes to e5, or let's say we attack this bishop with knight h5, and the bishop wants to go here. Then in both cases we can play the move d6. Obviously, if we played d5 before, that wouldn't be possible. The downside is that we have to be a bit more careful about ideas where white pushes d5. But in the lines I'm covering, d5 is nowhere is d5 really a big problem. Also, if you are going to play this line, I strongly recommend you to do some research for yourself. Here I am going to give you some lines and especially explain you the main ideas. So the main move here is d5, but I think many London players will love playing this structure. They will get this structure in the most part of their games, and they really like this space advantage on the king side, and their plans are basically the same, and this really is the structure they like to play against. So we are adapting our move order a bit, not to play d5 but to play c5 and maintain this pawn formation as long as it's interesting to do so. So the main move here is c3. After c3 we can go knight c6, still not moving this d pawn. I also want to mention that when we play like this, here it's not a problem, but in some lines these squares might be a bit weak. We will see in a bit, we will see another line where this became an idea. Here it's not possible, since obviously the pawn on c3 is in the way. So instead the main line, or the most played line, goes knight f3. And here we are playing bishop to e7. One of the points behind bishop e7 is we are controlling this diagonal, which means that our knight h5 jump is extra powerful, since now the bishop can't go here. And also, since we kept the pawn on d7, bishop e5 isn't so great either. Well, we can also put this pawn in between if we really want to. So let's say bishop d3, that's the main move here. Then we can go knight to h5. And if bishop e5, I forgot this knight is also here to capture the bishop, which makes bishop e5. And also I forgot that this knight is covering g7 very nicely, so we can actually play d6. White here, after bishop, sorry, let's go back. So bishop d3, and after knight to h5, white will, usually you see here 30 games go bishop g3. Then we take out the bishop. We nearly always take out the bishop when it goes to g3. Many London players will have some illusions that they can long castle and maybe attack along the h file, but in practice it's not always so easy. So h takes g3. And now we can actually go d5. This is a good moment to go d5. Also notice that with this pawn on with this knight on b1, white can't reinforce the knight with knight e2 f3. White misses one tempo, which means we can exchange the knight or even put extra pressure on it. But I think here, if white would play this, we can just exchange it and get a better structure and a better position. So that's why white will probably play knight to d2. And here I recommend bishop d7. You can also play queen b6, but bishop d7 is just fine. Knight e5 is still not good here, since you just take it. And after, let's say, queen c2, you can play either h6 or g6, but I recommend g6 here. With this battery, I almost always recommend to go g6, especially if you can fianchetto this bishop here. Now it's on e7, but it's not a big problem. There is no h4, h5 since white exchanged it. And if he wants to play f4, f5, first he has to take the knight. First has to move the knight. G5 isn't possible, so needs to go to E. And after knight E5, we can exchange the knight, play queen C7, and after white's F4, threatening maybe to go F5 or G4 followed by F5, we change the direction of the game and castle long. This long castle ID is always something to keep in mind. White is doing all kinds of things to attack us here on the king side, and he might actually just forget that we can castle out of danger and even turning the tables, because this is just a better position for us. Now let's take a look at white's most critical try, which happens after d4, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, e3, c5, now the move knight f3, knight c6, and here knight to c3, exclamation mark. So I had some trouble here finding the best reply against this move. Since we held back the pawn, we have some weaknesses here and here. And white tries to exploit it immediately. And it's not so easy to deal with. It's essential here that you play c takes d4, exclamation mark. And after e takes d4, you can now play the move a6. White will probably continue bishop d3. Then you go queen b6, putting pressure on this pawn. White will most likely go, let's bring in some more games, most likely go knight e4. Castles isn't dangerous. I think we can just pick up the pawn then. Knight e4, well, among others, I think we can even just take out the knight since it is with check. So the most critical line here is knight to a4, after which we took away our queen on a7. White might continue attacking or grabbing space with c4, and here the intermediate move bishop b4 check. First b5, and after a takes b5 we chuck in the intermediate move bishop b4. Knight c3 is the best reply by white. Other moves don't really threaten you. So after knight c3, knight takes d4. Here you can exchange, go back to b8. Queen g3 is the best try with a double attack on g7, and white wants to exchange queens for a better middle game, hoping to make use of these two passed pawns. So here I recommend you take with the b pawn, and after bishop d2, the best reply by white. Take out this knight on c3, play bishop a6, and after a4 you go king e7, and after a5 you play a6 and go rook c8 later. And well, you can see 0.0. White does have the bishop pair and this passed pawn, but you also have this passed pawn here. So this is something you can study on your own, but you can see it's definitely equal, and I think this is easier to defend than some lines where white takes here on b5 and gets these two passed pawns here, which is also equal, but I think that's much harder to defend. Or here on queen b6 after bishop e3 you can just take on b2 and drop back to b6. Some guy here won after knight e4, but in fact it's not a good move. So I'm guessing he managed to get the queen into trouble, not sure. Or maybe made some tactical mistake later. Yeah, see, this is already winning for black. Not sure white, how white could have won here. Oh, it's a blitz game, so maybe time trouble or something. So yeah, that's the most critical try I could find, and as you have seen, it's still an equal position for black, which if you study that end game, I think you will have no real trouble in the rest of the line. Now let's see, after white sets up his triangle, after what happens if white plays knight to d2. It's quite a flexible approach, however you also have to notice that white isn't developing his king side at all. And after bishop e7 we threaten knight h5, and after h3, like we said, d5 is coming. And we will challenge the f4 bishop, this time not by knight h5, but by bishop d6. So let's say, for example, knight to f3, and then bishop to d6. If here knight to e5, we can put a lot of pressure on this knight because on queen c7. And here we can actually go c4. Here e4 isn't possible since our knight is controlling it and there is no white piece supporting it. There is no bishop on d3. There is no knight on d2. There is no queen on c2 to support in e4 break. So e4 isn't possible. We just take it. Which means b3 is the best approach, and let's say play would continue with like something like this. Here we can take the pawn, and white can actually go for perpetual if he wants, but he doesn't have anything better since this blunders the game. And if white takes bishop on d6, then after queen takes e6, bishop on d3, we don't really have any problems. We still need to do a little bit of work to develop this bishop, but it's fine. The position is objectively equal, and white doesn't really have so much to do. Again, knight e5 isn't possible here, so this should be a fine position. So to conclude, I wanted to show you some model games which I played against. This game I played against Deco Chess. Also, I have to admit, with some help from the engine. I was studying the best response, but I think it's quite instructive. So here after c5, c3, knight c6 and knight d2. Here we go bishop e7 again. Right plays h3 to tuck away the bishop. We play d5, wanting to go bishop d6. And here white plays bishop b5, which is a slight mistake, I think. And here we can play queen b6. White insists on keeping the bishop there. And after a6, bishop takes b takes. Knight f3, we go a5, preventing b4 here. Also preventing white to go a5. After queen b3, we take the queen. Go c4, and you can see we will maybe have c5 later. After knight d2, we play knight d7, freeing the square to go f6. And after b3, we take this, play c5. White goes with the rook to b1. We put the king on f7, protecting this pawn, liberating the rook. h4, c4. We are fixing some weaknesses, and we can challenge the open file later. So here, rook on a6, and our plan is to go after this pawn on a4 by means of knight b6 and bishop d7. White plays e4. We ignore it. White attacks our piece, so we don't have time now to go a4, but we can go knight a8, forcing white to go back. And after bishop d7 takes, rook on b7. We chase the rook away, which doesn't really have any good squares now, so goes back to b1. And after knight to b6, Decode Chess decided to take out the knight, and the rest of the game isn't that interesting. We will protect our a pawn, and after bishop f4, go after the weak c3 pawn, after which pretty much everything is falling apart. So I'm going to quickly go through the last moves. And well, this is just over for white. So this is a nice example of how you can play this system. So here's another model game also against Decode Chess. So d4, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, knight f3, c5, e3, knight c6. And here white goes d takes c5, which in my opinion is not so good to do this so early. Objectively, I guess it's about equal, but well, white doesn't really have an advantage here. So knight c3, bishop b4. We take the opportunity to pin the knight, and after a3, we take out the bishop. We create these weaknesses here to play against, and we immediately target it. After bishop d3, we have e5 and e4, so this is a fork. So that's a problem white has to fix. He goes bishop g5, and after knight e4, we are threatening c3. White goes knight to d2. And after takes on c3, queen takes g4. You can see that the white queen is in the line of fire. Maybe white has some attacking ideas, but it's not so good. One thing to notice is that sometimes it's useful with f5 or e4 to shut the diagonal over this bishop. So here it goes back to f1. On e2, I guess we could just take it. And here the very strong move, knight takes b4. This is pinned, and after knight b3, I think this is already a mate in a couple of moves. So knight c2, and after king d2, the very strong move, knight b1. And here we bring in the rest of our pieces. White has to block, and instead, well, we can take the bishop immediately, but even stronger is rook c8. And after king f2, we play king b2 with the point that after king e1, the king has to step back, and then this rook connection is disturbed, which means that, well, the game is just over. Queen c3 is even faster, but I think even the very crude Queen a1 perfectly fine. You are a full rook and some pawns up, so looks like there was a mate here. Okay, by looks like there was a mate by pushing the king to the side. And here this would pick up the bishop to check. And here you can repeat the same idea. Yeah. So also a nice example that this line isn't like totally harmless for white either. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe or leave a comment, and I will see you maybe in one of the next ones.